Today we're doing Math 6, Mission 3, Lesson 13, Benchmark Percentages. So these diagrams here are benchmark percentages. These are benchmarks, or these are percentages that you just have to know. It's like memorizing your math facts. You have to know these. So you have one shaded out of, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So that is 1/10. We can write that as a decimal, as 0.10, right? So that would be 10 100ths, or move that over to 10%. So 1 out of 10, 1/10 is 10%. All right, here we have 1 out of 2 shaded, right? 1 out of 2 shaded. That we can write as a decimal as 0.5 or 0.50. And as a percentage, we move that over 2 decimal places to get us 50%. Or we could think of it as 50 hundredths. And since decimals are out of 100, it's 50%. Now let's look at this last one. We have 1, 2, 3 shaded out of 4. 3/4 as a decimal is 0.75, or 75 hundredths. And 75 hundredths, or 0.75, we move that decimal over 2, gets us 75%. All right, answer the questions below. How much is 50% of 10 liters of milk? Well, here's 10 liters. 50% we know from up here is a half. So I'm going to cut that in half, right? So that would be like doing 10 times 1/2. 10 times 1/2 is 5. So each one of these is worth 5. How far is 50% of 2,000 kilometer trip? Well, again, we're going to cut it in half. So that would be like doing 2,000 times 1/2. So that would leave us 1,000 for each section. So half of 2,000 is 1,000. How long is 50% of a 24-hour day? Well, that would be like doing 24 times 1/2. So that's 24 over 2, and 24 divided by 2 would be 12, right? So how can you find 50% of any number? Well, 50% of a quantity is a number, is half of that quantity. So if I ask you what's 50% of 20, you're going to tell me it's 10. Alrighty. So now we have, how far is 10% of a 2,000 kilometer trip? Well, we know that 10% is 1/10. So if we have a 2,000 kilometer trip, we would do 2,000 times 1/10. So that would get us 2,000 over 10, and I can take off a 0 on each end, and that leaves us with 200. So 10% of a 2,000 kilometer trip is 200 kilometers. How much is 10% of 10 liters of milk? Well, I would take my 10 liters of milk and I would multiply it by 1/10 to see how much 10% would be, and that is 1. How long is 10% of a 24-hour day? Well, I would do 24 times 1/10, which would be 24 divided by 10. So anytime I divide by 10, it moves the decimal over to the left. And if I multiply by 10, it moves the decimal to the right. So here's my invisible decimal that we don't really write when we have whole numbers, but we can. We could even write it like this if we're working with money. And because I'm dividing by 10, I move that decimal over 1. So the answer is 2 4/10. So how long is 10% of a 24-hour day? It's 2 hours and 4/10 of an hour. How can you find 10% of any number? Well, 10% of a quantity is 1/10 of that quantity. All right, let's keep going. Alrighty, so our next one says, how long is 75% of a 24-hour day? Well, we know from the very beginning that 75% is 3/4, right? That's our fraction. You have to know that fraction and that decimal. So 75% is 3/4. 75% is 75/100ths of a decimal, right? So we're going to take 24 and multiply it by 3/4, just like we did here. 24 times 1/10 to get 10% and 24 times 1/2 to get 50%. So we could do 24 over 1 times 3 over 4 and multiply it out. So 24 times 3, 4 times 3 is 12. 3 times 2 is 6 plus 1 is 7, 72/4. And then we would have to do 72 divided by 4. 4 goes into 7 one time. That gets me 3. 4 goes into 32 8 times, and that leaves me with 18. 18 hours. We could also do it a little differently. We could look at it as 24 over 1 times 3/4, and I could cross-reduce first. You should be familiar with cross reduction because we've done this in 5th grade. So I look here and say, ooh, 4 can go into both 4 and 24. 4 divided by 4 is 1. 24 divided by 4 is 6. So this allows me to reduce first instead of reducing after. So 6 times 3 is 18. 1 times 1 is 1. So that leaves me with 18. See how much easier it is? I don't have to deal with 72/4. I don't have to deal with bigger numbers. So cross-reducing first helps me eliminate dealing with bigger numbers. You don't have to, but it is a strategy you can use. So how far is 75% of 2,000 kilometers? Well, that would be like doing 2,000 times 3/4. Again, I'm going to look to cross-reduce before. So I know that 4 goes into 2,000 500 times. How do I know? Because 4 goes into 25 times, and then I add those 2 zeros onto it. 4 divided by 4 is 1. So now I have to do 500 times 3 instead of 2,000 times 3 divided by 4. I like that a lot better. 5 times 3 is 15, and I have my 2 zeros, so 1,500 kilometers. How much is 75% of 10 liters of milk? Well, I would do 10 times 3/4. So 10 times 3 is 30 divided by 4. So 30 divided by 4. 4 goes into 3 0 times. 4 goes into 30 7 times. That gets us 28. Leaves us with 2. Our decimal, bring down the 0. 4 goes into 20 5 times. So 75% of 10 is 7.5%. Okay. How can you find 75% of any number? Well, 75% of a quantity is 3/4 of that quantity. All right, let's go on to activity 2. All right, so this says, explain how you can calculate each value mentally. So 9 is 50% of what number? So this is different. We're now given the 50%. We have to figure out the 100%. So it's asking us to calculate the 100%, knowing the given information. So 9 is 50%. So here it is. 9 is 50. I need another 9 to equal 100%. So 9 is 50% of what number? 9 is half of 9 times 2, which is 18. So 9 is half of 18 because 9 times 2, that's like saying 50% is half. So what's the reciprocal of half? Well, 2. So I can say 9 times 2 is what? 18. All right, let's look at this. 9 is 25% of what number? 9 is 25% of what number? Well, 25% is 1/4. So the reciprocal of 1/4 is 4 over 1, or 4. So I can do 9 times 4, which is 36. So 25% of 36 should equal 9, which it does, right? Because if I draw my tape diagram, if 36 is my whole, I need to divide that by 4 into 4 parts, because that's what 25% is. And 36 divided by 4 is 9. 9 is 10% of what number? Well, 10% would be 1/10. So the reciprocal would be 10. So I'm going to do 9 times 10, which gets me 90. 9 is 10% of 90. Let's look at this one. 9 is 75% of one number. Ooh, so 75% is 3/4. So the reciprocal of that would be 4/3. So I would do 9 times 4/3. And I like to cross reduce first because it helps me. I could do 9 times 4 and then divide by 3. Or I could do 9 over 1 times 4 over 3, and then I could cross reduce. 3 goes into 3 one time. 3 goes into 9 3 times. 3, and then I just multiply across. 3 times 4 is 12. 1 times 1 is 1. So that leaves me with 12. 9 is 75% of 12. We can see that in a tape diagram by saying 9 is 3 of these, right? Oops, sorry. 3 of these is equal to 9. So 9 divided by 3 is 3, 6, 9. But then I have one more. So 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3 is 12, or 3 times 4 is 12. All right, 9 is 150% of what number? Okay, so we have 50%, another 50%, which equals 100%, which is what we're looking for. But we have another 50%. And all of that equals 9, because 150% is 9. So then I have to take 9 and get it into 50%, 50%, and 50%. There are how many boxes there? There are 3 boxes. So I have to take 9 and divide it equally into those 3 boxes. So 9 divided by 3 is 3. So each one of these boxes is worth 3. But I only want 100%. I only want 100%. So I only want 2 of those 3 boxes. So I want 2 times 3, which is 6. So my answer is 9 is 150% of 6. All right, go ahead and review your lesson summary.